Hello and welcome to Keeping It Real. I'm Joy and I'm your host, and I'm really happy that you can join me on this video presentation. Um, I'd like to start off by saying we're going to be talking about cathedrals that are megalithic in size and that appear to have a pattern to them, is what I noticed. And after further study and research, I found that I believe that these cathedrals weren't originally purposed for religion. As a matter of fact, I believe that they were from an older civilization that was here prior to the last cataclysm, which I'm going to be getting into some of that in some of my further videos. But I thought a good place to start would be with these cathedrals, just to kind of get your mind thinking, open up your thoughts, because we've been brainwashed as a people all over the world. In every nation, people are taught a false narrative that does not reflect what we're seeing. And I'm not alone in my thoughts and my theories. I am a person that references most of my research to scripture, which tells us a story there. It tells us about these cataclysms, such as Noah's flood. It talks about giants living on the earth, which the research that I have done and others have done, going back to the Sumerian culture and the Anunnakis, tells another story that is very similar and is in line and parallels what the Bible is teaching us. And I believe that it's all written right there in God's Word. And if we open our hearts and our eyes and our mind to Christ, I believe that He will lead us into all truth. And for that reason, I believe that that is why these things are starting to surface and people are starting to become consciously aware of these phenomena that are happening in our skies, with these sites around the world that are showing structures that are, that seem to be built, some of them by giants. Some of the structures are just massive in size. The doors are even massive. Although the narrative that we're given does not fit in line with these facts. Going back and looking at people in the 18th, 17th, 18th century who were migrating here and homesteading, their plans are to, make a home for themselves and their family. And, most of the time with the tools that are available, they're cutting trees, they're making log cabins, they're doing that kind of stuff as for structures, mainly for their homes and, farming and so forth. But yet we're seeing these structures during that same time frame that are being claimed by the people of that time, which would be, in our time. And I believe that there was something that had taken place prior to that in terms of a cataclysm that was worldwide, which is one of multiple cataclysms, that include our polar shifts, and also our sun does some funny things, which I'm going to discuss that. I'm not going to get into the whole realm of that on this particular video, but some of my future videos I will be going through those. Right now I'm just going to kind of start with having you go through some of these presentations here, and this particular one on the cathedrals, and I just hope that you enjoy them. And remember, these particular cathedrals are in the United States, pretty much in every single state, and that is what we're seeing. And there's just no way a horse and buggy can someone on a horse and buggy with the type of tools that were available could build these types of structures. Most of them built out of brick. A lot of them have the same types of windows, which I'll refer to as a flower window, which you'll see in some of the interior. Solid stone and, like a concrete material that had been poured. These are huge structures. So just, take a look for yourself. And again, these structures are pretty much all over the earth, every continent, including China. These same types of structures are also located there. They're magnificent. China being a communist country, which it has for hundreds of years, it does. I mean, look at some of this architect. You're seeing these large, massive columns, like in that particular video slide. Some of them look like what you would see in India, which there's many of them there. Most of them, I've noticed, do have the Gothic eye appeal to them, and the spires that I think were used for energy, that were, somehow maybe collecting ether. That's why they were so tall. Some of them, 50 feet high. You're also, looking at these in New York. This one here is in New York. That one is in New York. Just massive. And they didn't have the crosses. Some of the original lithographs on some of these structures that we were able to find do not have the crosses. I believe those were added later. There's just so much to this that it should really open the eyes of people. And again, some of these have been, remodeled a little bit. Most of the structure is intact, but of course they've, put a facade over it and made it look a lot newer than what it is. But in some of the later pictures here, you're going to see some of what they look like damaged from the cataclysm. And then later, these new inheritors came in and basically inherited these structures. The cathedrals are just one of many types of structures that are found all over the world, including Machu Picchu. In South America, we're seeing a lot of megalithic sites there that were strewn all over the place and at one time covered in mud and water. Same thing in Egypt, that was all underwater at one time. They found whale bones, sea fossils, shells, things like that. So we know that was underwater at one time, that entire area. And, this could have gone back to the time of Noah's flood, where these structures were built during that time frame. And again, there were giants. When you see what people look like standing next to these structures, they look like little ants. And you have to think, okay, why so big? Why so massive? And if it was, in fact, built by the people of the 17th and 18th century, why are they all the same? Did they use the same architect all around the world? I don't think so. That would not make sense. And, it's like you're having these built in every single country. And why would they all have the same idea? It just doesn't seem likely, unless these were purposed for something else, such as maybe electricity. A structure that harvested electricity by a people that was here prior to the last cataclysm that probably wiped out most of them. Then you have these survivors that come out and reclaim these buildings that are left, these structures, and everything's repurposed. And some of the stories that are given to us, when you try to go back through and look for, signs of building, the masonry and some of the other things that the scaffolding and some of the other things that you should see during a construction period, you're not seeing. You might see a few pictures that reflect, that look like people, posing, but they totally seem out of place. They're holding a shovel and a pick, or, standing next to a structure, with a few scaffolding benches, but nothing that would be required to build these types of structures. It just seems so out of place and just unrealistic. And as you could see by looking at these photos, some of these structures were demolished. They give us these, stories that, are concocted. They do not make sense. There was a great fire. They've had pretty much great fires in every single state, burning down these ancient structures. If they can't seem to come up with a narrative for them, then they burn them down and destroy them, which really is kind of strange, because most of these are all solid concrete and brick. So, and metals. So how could that even burn? But yet you're seeing them like burn to the ground, practically. So maybe those are pictures of the cataclysm, how some of these structures were left, which obviously could answer that question. So they just came up with a story that they burnt down, and a cow knocked over a candle and the whole structure burnt down. And that is no joke. That's actually a true story. But these are certainly beautiful structures, absolutely beautiful. But if you notice the center, in the center of the structure, you're seeing these windows, these round windows, and almost all of them have these particular types of windows that appear to be purposed for a reason that we just haven't figured out yet, and more than likely harvested ether and created some kind of electrical current that they used during this particular time frame. This could have been a cataclysm, probably a polar shift is what I'm thinking, a magnetic pole shift, probably 600 years ago is what I'm estimating. Maybe some of these go back even further, and I know we have structures now that they're uncovering that go back to the last ice age, which would have been one of the major catastrophes that happened on a cyclical basis every 12,000 years, which again I will be discussing more of those in my future videos with you. So these are some lithographs that I located before. Obviously they had photography, they did lithograph, and with a lot of structures and people too. The photos, photographing didn't come into the mid 18th century, so the churches I found in Europe are just as magnificent as these. Some of them are just huge, mind-boggling. This one's like a castle-like structure. Of course, all these are in the U.S. Actually, I live in Fresno, and we have a similar cathedral that is in our downtown area. That it's on a smaller scale, but it's almost identical to the Gothic look that we're seeing. This one is a mission structure style. This one's more like a castle, Gothic castle type, but most of them are the Gothic type structures. This one looks more of a Indian type structure. This one, you have the round domes, which are seen on many of the structures as well. Some of the older ones that go back, as they say, the narrative to the Roman time, but I do find some discrepancies in those stories as well. But the huge spires, most of them are in a, in a shape that looks like a cross almost, and with the really tall spires. And some of them, they did not repurpose the crosses on them, and they left them as they were. This one here is just magnificent. I mean, just ancient. This one's probably 1,000 years old, I would imagine. This one here with the columns, we're seeing a lot of these types of structures, especially in every state for the government resources. They're repurposed usually for that. All the government buildings are in those types of structures with the large columns, Romanesque type period, or type architect is what is. Again, the round flowered windows, very standard for these cathedrals. And just try to picture, people in the 17th, 18th century, that were still migrating and utilizing horse and buggy during that time, and trying to haul concrete, bricks, the thousands of bricks it would take to build one of these structures is just in itself would be way more than what they would be capable of in that time, utilizing what they had available to them to build. There's just no way. These are just too great of buildings. And why would they, if they're coming here and more focused on, growing food, farming, building their homes. They're not going to be putting their time and effort, especially if you have still very small populations of people, into building these churches, cathedrals, for worship. That is not going to be the main objective. It's going to be shelter and food and water. I know that we've had some great feats, but even now, today, we cannot build these types of structures. We don't, it's like we're going backwards in time. The further you go back, the more elaborate and the more beautiful these structures are. Just absolutely magnificent. And yet today, everything's built like a Cracker Jack box. It's a huff and a puff, and it would just come tumbling down. They certainly don't build like they did back then. And the further you go back, like I said, the more beautiful these structures are, and the more complicated. Even to tear one of these down is a feat in itself. That some have not even been able to do, that it would just be too costly, as some of them have said. and left the structures, just withering away somewhere on some land that, they just didn't find any use for. So they'll just leave it there and let it wither away. But for the most part, most of them are repurposed and in this case, repurposed into a cathedral, a place of worship, mostly by the Catholic religion. But we see a lot of them that are the same style, Gothic style, that is also in the Mormon religion, which in a later video I'll get more into that. And as we move through some of these video presentations, you're gonna see how much truth is gonna come to light, and you're just gonna really start to question everything that you've been taught, because it's all a lie. It's just a big deceptive lie, a big cover-up, as with many things that we're finding out. It's like this is the time of enlightenment. God is moving. He's opening the eyes and the ears and, giving us the voices to speak his truths. I mean, since when would Jesus need something like this to worship? He never, probably envisioned something of this magnitude. As a matter of fact, he used to get very angry over the money changers and the way that everything was, back then even repurposed and used to make money and bring in revenue. So, on the inside of these are the interior photos of the cathedrals that we just seen. But as you can see, the window, the flower window, they call them rose windows. You could just see how massive these are, and just the beautiful, intricate detail that's been given to build these and to give them this look. The stained windows, stained glass, wood, beautiful woodworking. And later you have people that just come in and put some benches in there and call it a place of worship. But again, I believe these were just built for something totally different, and I'm going to talk more about that later in my other videos. But I wanted to thank you and for sitting in and joining me on this presentation. And please subscribe, and if you like the video. That way you will be notified of my future presentations and YouTube videos that I release in the upcoming weeks. So have a great week, and God bless.